Today, we all are hearing a lot about AI agents and the promise of AI agents. And one of the things we were talking about as we were prepping for this panel is, this question of like, what's going to be the one-person billion-dollar company, right? When is that going to get created? Because AI agents are going to do all the work. And so we are three, founders who are both building AI agents for our core business models, right? We are actually native Gen AI startups and platforms. We are also using AI agents in the real world, in our actual businesses, to decrease our burn. So we are seeing real ROI right now through the use of our own agents, our own platforms, and our own methods. So we thought we would put together this, this panel, this talk, to really start to address the question of where is the real world ROI with AI agents. So that's the purpose of this talk. So thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to have us introduce ourselves. My name is Tatyana Mamut. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wayfound, which is an AI agent management platform. It's an AI agent that improves other AI agents. That's the way to think about it. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about that. And then we've got Scott Jorgensen and Matt Wyman, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Absolutely. So Scott, great to meet all of you, and thanks very much. Thanks very much for joining us today. At Waive, we're trying to help B2B companies with their go-to-market. And so we build teams of agents. We build and run them on the Wayfound platform. So we're excited to be partnered with Wayfound. And critically, that it's teams. And across marketing, across sales, customer success. And we chose the Wayfound platform because, as you know, if you want to execute a B2B strategy, you're always trying to align your teams, execute the strategy. The manager agent on the Wayfound platform aligns the agents to be making sure there's no chasm between marketing and sales, the classic problems. And of course, as the agents try to work with your people, that they're staying aligned with how your people work too. So we'll be sharing more about that, but that's what we do.
My name is Matt Wyman, co-founder of a company called Okareo. My co-founder is around here somewhere, Boris. I'm sure you'll bump into him later. Okareo provides builders with a mechanism to evaluate whether their agents and RAGs and other LLM-based architectures are working the way they expect them to. So at the root, we have a synthetic data generation mechanism that allows you to create scenarios for behaviors. Those scenarios allow you during build time to decide, when you're developing that agent, to figure out whether that agent's behaving the way you expect it to. Do the embeddings work the way you expect them to? Are they as efficient as they could be? But if it's a multi-turn agent, an agent talking to other agents, does it hand off at the right time? Does it measure correctly? And then when you find an error, you find an issue, that same synthetic data allows you to build trusted data. So you can do fine tuning, you can do prompt tuning, and ultimately in production, you can see whether or not there's an error or issue and close the loop as a builder. I use the phrase builder because we're in a new world of development now. Our customers are machine learning engineers. They are software developers, but they're also very technically minded business people, SMEs, who understand a specific case and they're consuming a platform like Wayfound, or they're working with yourself with Waive, building out large networks of agents and trying to solve real world business issues.
Great. And of course, we are in the B partner space. So thank you so much for inviting us here. Michael, you want to say a few words about B?
Sure. Welcome everybody to B Partners. We're absolutely delighted to have you all here, especially so with two of our companies joined together to collaborate on really a new wave of innovation that has gotten all of us at B Partners really, really excited. We look back at the history of what we've done to date, and I can't tell you how excited I am about the innovations that we're seeing. In the last 18 months, we've been more active than we ever have been in the history of our organization. We've always prided ourselves as being very stable, only investing in 6 or 8 companies per year. And now we're doing 1 a month. And we can't help ourselves. And so we're going to run out of money. We only have 4 more slots left. So we'll have to raise some more money, I suppose, and add a whole new column. So the next time you're here, you'll probably see them in a different format. But we're just so excited to have you both here. And we haven't hung out yet, but I've heard a lot about you. And I'm really excited.
All right.
I'm really excited to hear more about what you guys are going to say today. So welcome to Be Partners. We're really delighted. And thank you so much for everybody who commits capital to the innovation ecosystem and commits time as well, because we are indeed building the future. It's an exciting one. And we should all celebrate that and support each other in that effort. So, yeah.
Thank you, Michael. So, what we wanted to start to do, how many of you guys are founders? Founders, raise your hands. Founders, raise your hands. How many of you are investors? Raise your hands. Investors. Ooh, lots of investors. Fantastic. And then how many of you are operators in larger companies and enterprises? Okay, just a couple. Okay.
And builders?
Huh?
All future builders. They're all future builders.
All builders, right? All builders. Okay, fantastic. So now we kind of know who's in the audience. So one of the things that, of course, as startup founders and as investors, you're looking to do is you want to scale as quickly as possible with as little money, as little burn as possible. So we want to tell the story first to start off with how we as native Gen AI founders are actually decreasing our burn and seeing real ROI right now in conserving our precious resources, which is number one, right? Money, our burn, but also founder time, right? Founder time is really precious. Hiring people is super time consuming when you're a founder. So what are some of the ways that we are really becoming much more effective and efficient as startups with AI agents? So with that, Matt, I'll start with you. How has Okareo been working with AI agents, and what are maybe one or two use cases that you can highlight for us about how you're really seeing ROI as a founder?
So I think actually there will be some overlap because we've been having conversations. I think it's something that's incumbent upon all of us who are building right now, building AI native companies, is to collaborate and figure out how we can push the edges. In fact, I think it's mandatory. We have to go faster. This is a world that's moving very quickly, but we have to go faster. It's not just spend less. You have to actually spend less and move even faster. So there are some common use cases about lead gen, inbound SDRs and whatnot. A couple of things we've done to kind of push the edges. Two specifically that I'll touch on. The first one, we've established a multi-agent hub that has access to a variety of resources. It has access, for example, to loops for audience members. We can do drip campaigns. It has access to what I call a very basic CRM. I'm intentionally not buying a large branded CRM yet. I'm using Airtable and a ton of different Airtables that these agents talk to keep track of customers, keep track of conversations. And then these agents are connected all the way out to our front page through Wayfound, where you can have a conversation with one of these agents and you can start to ask questions about Okareo. But more importantly, as a dev tools company, as a company that has SDKs, an extremely complex buying journey where you actually have to prove with real world use cases for your models and your agents, you have to prove to yourself that Okareo is actually going to help you evaluate those agents and that they're not going to go off the rails. Well, that's a non-trivial sales cycle. That means we need to have what amounts to some sort of sales engineer or some sort of onboarding process that's going to teach you all about this new world of agents. Well, that's expensive, right? That's a very expensive activity to do. So that puts you in the old world, that would put you into one of two camps. You're either going to have to make the perfect mousetrap on the one side with PLG and a card swipe at the end. And it has to be an absolutely perfect mousetrap, which is hard to do right now because the world's changing so quickly. Or on the other side, you have to have this more enterprise-ish motion where you're going to assign a person for every sale, and they're going to go out there and do some sort of proof of value experiment with the customer and go on site for months. Well, what we're doing instead is we have agents that are connected to all of our docs, all of our blogs, all of our roadmap and features, and they can actually code generate evaluations for you based on your use cases. And you can use them to learn about our system, ask questions about our system, but you can also use them to solve problems. And then, of course, we're seeing all these interactions, so we can step in and sort of pick up the ball and carry it forward. So this is almost a two-part interaction. We can build a much higher level of both reputation, but also relationship with these new people that are showing up, and therefore gain the benefit of a high relationship type sales cycle with still the lower CAC of a PLG type model where people are just coming in and learning about our system. So I think it fundamentally affects our entire go-to-market motion. From an efficiency standpoint, that means we can bring on more complex customers doing more complex workloads more quickly and more easily in a shorter time period. But also we don't have to hire a whole group of people immediately around sales engineering, some of the inbound SDRs, some of the outbound. We can completely change how we're thinking about that relationship and that life cycle. And we're talking about dozens, more than that, of these independent agents that are performing these tasks. And I think I just heard about one today, another idea around competitive. And so I think we're in a moment where every time we hear about a use case, we're just trying it and seeing what works.
So concretely, you have something that's sort of like a sales agent or an SE kind of agent.
Onboarding agent.
Onboarding agent.
Yeah, that's the phrase I typically lean on. But
yeah. Like an agent that really helps take the customer through the entire kind of onboarding POC kind of process. And then how much less is your burn because you have that agent or that different kind of conglomeration of agents that kind of serves that function? Like what concretely, like what's the impact, right, on your burn?
So in the position we're in now, probably 2 heads approximately worth of people that would be focused on this activity that we can actually have, we can actually cover where we actually need to step in and have that real world communication, and the agent can cover the rest. And then it's also interesting. I think this question of how do you define it precisely? It is hard because this is a set of agents around onboarding, but they also know if it's a self-serve sign up, they know eventually at the right moment to give a nudge to set up a conversation with us or to schedule a meeting or to suggest a demo if the person hasn't been as engaged, which is not exactly what an onboarding agent would do. So you can start to collapse and intersect some of these activities in a more healthy way.
So you're saving 2 headcount, and how big is your team overall?
We are 6 full-time, and we've got a set of folks outside,
right. So
primarily engineering. But
so you're saving 30%,
yeah,
right? Like that's a pretty significant ROI.
Yeah.
Right?
That's all right.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. And Scott, why don't you tell us sort of like, as you're setting up your practice, how are you like thinking about scaling up this practice? You have a more of a professional services, really leaning in, usually you think about, kind of professional services organizations and is entirely, right? Like human driven, high touch driven, that kind of thing. But like, how does a startup like yours actually use AI agents, and how are you flipping that script, right?
Yeah.
Especially as you talk to investors too.
No, exactly. Well, and it's very real. Our investors actually, just this last week, we're working at a seed round of funding, which is all happening, which is very exciting. But they said, okay, well, you thought you wanted 7, can you do 5? And of course, being
customers or
5 employees.
Employees, yeah.
So we have 5 right now because the conversation said along, we can do 5. Look how many agents we're going to use instead. I mean, it was very real. And one of the key ones was we actually are fortunate enough, even though we're just getting going, we have customers banging down the door. Like it's super exciting. And we're like, well, we don't have to have someone babysitting the website, like sending a bunch of emails who, let's be honest, when you hire those awesome folks, they haven't seen 3 generations of enterprise software. They haven't advised executive teams on how to go through digital transformation and all the rest. Like they don't know. I mean, they were in college 3 years ago. Right? I mean, they don't know. And so you ask them to do this nearly impossible task. They're logging, and I worked at Salesforce for 18 years. They're logging into Salesforce and 25 other tools. And so most of the money I'm even paying them is clicking a bunch of buttons. They're not even talking to customers. So we have an agent on our website, somewhat similar, but we think of it extremely differently. In our business model, we want someone to meet us, spill their guts about, here's the future of my business with AI agents in marketing, sales, and customer success, and get through what we think of as an agent development cycle with us, which we structure as 1 month or 3 months, and like, let's get going. Then they subscribe to the teams of agents using the manager agent. We make them continuously better and better and better. So for both our customer and for us, we want that consulting cycle to be absolutely as short as possible. If it was all just a bunch of robots and it was just as good, we would just do that. I mean, I really would love that. Like, that would be great. And I ran an innovation consulting team at Salesforce. It's a lot of fun work, but if the customer can be successful, so much the better. So we didn't hire an SDR. We didn't hire a BDR. So I have some agents doing those kinds of things. And what happens? They come to the website. It's using the same sales methodologies we were trained deeply on at Salesforce, asks all the great questions, and then it puts the same information into HubSpot that I would have been paying someone to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, we're saving, what is that, 2 out of 7? You can help me with the math.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the percentage off the top of my head, but no, I mean, like right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we would hire someone to just babysit the website for at least a year.
Right.
You know, at least. Now it goes further though, right? So you can share more of this if you want, but so we are channel partners, right? So in some cases we're sourcing our own business. Great. Sometimes she's sending us leads. We had a great meeting around, okay, we're going to have to be very serious around the operations of our channel sales process here. What does the KPIs look like? How are we breaking down the sales? How do we want to forecast this thing? And then we said, shouldn't we just have the agent talking to your HubSpot and the agent talking to our HubSpot have a meeting? There's a meetings feature in Waive. So we haven't built this one yet. But we probably crushed another headcount right there.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, actually, this morning we were on the phone and we actually said, we need to align on our roadmaps, right? So they have customers that have feature requests for us. And I said, well, why don't I just give you our roadmap agent and you can figure out what's on our roadmap. And if it's not on our roadmap, you can make a request in the roadmap agent. And we literally send you the link on the phone.
Yeah.
And then you guys were like, great. Well, then we don't have to meet, do we?
Right. So I did two things, right? So now there's this new employee agent, the roadmap agent from Wayfound. So it has to be accessible, right? In our company, we use Slack. Every agent's got a channel. So now there's an agent-Wayfound roadmap channel. I went to the agent and I said, I'm going to publish you in our employee agent directory. Please describe for my employees what they should use you for. What's the purpose? What do they not do with you? So it wrote its own little onboarding manual. I published that all in Slack. I said, employees have at it, get going. And then we have a consulting agent. So we run our consulting engagements. It knows the whole methodology, takes my team through it. I said, anytime we need to assess the likelihood that we can crush it in our solution with what Wayfound can and can't do, and give them some feedback if we can't. So now my consulting agent can talk to your roadmap agent.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah. So we have our agents working so that we don't have to. And we have our agents meeting so that we don't have to actually get on the phone with each other. We like to get on the phone with each other, but again, we're saving literally multiple hours a week and a month on not having these recurring meetings with our partners because we have our agents doing most of the work, right? When we're not working. Yeah.
I was going to jump in really fast. So we haven't talked about this before.
Yeah.
So you're pushing into Slack on that basis.
Yes.
One of the things we decided to do with that hub is we have an agent that sits there and watches all the traffic going back and forth.
Yeah.
And when it sees something it thinks is relevant, it pushes to a common channel in
like
Slack.
The news agent?
Basically like a news agent.
Yeah.
We call it the relevant agent, but it just hits everyone so they know that everyone can see that it popped up with whether it was an interaction or a question that came in or a new customer or whatever it saw as relevant.
Yeah.
Puts it in the channel along with a little history of like, okay, this is what happened before, so you can get some background.
No, that's
so
awesome.
It's a really similar case of like, okay, it's not just about the replacement, it's about the efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So you've suddenly become more efficient.
Yeah.
You've been given the right piece of information, not just a large pool of information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all these channels that every agent has, I had a little chat with our agent engineer and I said, because he's younger than I am, and I said, look, in any organization, you manage down, you manage across, you manage up. And if something is going on, you have a report out. So I said, anything interesting going on with these agents, please have the agent report out into this channel. So water cooler, we can just sort of look through and go, well, how's the company doing? Otherwise, we're all going to start asking you how the company's doing. Like you need to be reporting out all the time. Yeah.
Right. So I will share a little bit about what we're doing. So we do have an onboarding agent. We do have a lead gen agent, right? So that's 2 headcount. But then I have a dirty little secret because some of you know me. I actually teach a lot of product managers how to do product management. And we have no plans to ever hire a product manager at Wayfound because we have AI agents doing all the work. So we have a product roadmap agent. That agent knows all about the product roadmap. It can reprioritize or make suggestions on reprioritizing the roadmap based on customer feedback, based on a lot of the signals that we're getting in. We have a customer discovery agent. We have Grain as our recording platform. We push all our transcripts from Grain when we talk to customers, whether we do customer research or we're talking to prospective customers. We push all of those transcripts to our customer discovery agent. And then our customer discovery agent reports out, right? What are the new insights? What are the things that we're hearing? What are the new features that people are requesting? And then we have meetings between the customer discovery agent and the product roadmap agent to see if the customer requests in the customer discovery calls are aligned with the priorities in the roadmap. And the agents then come back and tell me, right, if we need to reprioritize the roadmap. So 70% of the work that a product manager would do are done by a set of agents. So what does that mean for me? Well, that means for me that when we get big enough where I would have potentially people with product backgrounds to be hired, they would be general managers and they would be managing a team of agents, of product, because the IC product managers will always be the agents. But the more the GMs, right, the people running the different business lines, the people running the different product units, probably will still be humans. I'm not entirely sure about that. But again, for our company, we are 6. We're saving 3 headcount, right? Because I haven't needed to hire anybody for onboarding. I haven't needed to hire an SDR. So the SDR is actually the lead gen agent on our platform, along with HubSpot's research agent. So HubSpot has this agent.ai platform. They have a really good company research agent. So when our lead gen agent gets a new contact, it puts it into HubSpot. HubSpot's research agent then can do the research on the background of the company, qualifies it as an MQL, right? Then sends it to me. Then I requalify it as an SQL, right? And then we move forward with it or not. So again, so much of the work in that whole process and that whole flow is now being done by agents that we've built, collaborating with agents that are built by other platforms. And that's the other thing that, is really interesting about our platform is that you can have third-party agents. So we also have a documentation agent to help us with onboarding. So we do our documentation in Gitbook. Gitbook has an AI agent. So we connect our onboarding agent with Gitbook's agent. So when our customer asks us a question that isn't in our sort of stuff that we've created, actually Spencer is here. Spencer, you created the Gitbook agent, yes. So and so when our onboarding agent can't answer a question, it goes and it asks the Gitbook agent, where that has all of our documentation and a whole bunch of other detail. And so these 2 agents collaborate together to get the customer the answer that they want. And so we don't have to hire customer success or any onboarding people or anything like that. So, it's a really efficient way to run a business and to scale up a business as well. So one kind of elephant in the room, and Matt, I want to ask you this, is, when we talk about these things, people always say like, but what about hallucinations? How do we know that the customer discovery agent isn't just making up things, right? That customers are saying when they're not really saying it, and now you just reprioritize your roadmap based on some crap that this LLM made up, right? How do we make sure that they're not
versus
hallucinating?
Crap that a user made up. And
or sometimes PMs can be a little unreliable as well. So there's that piece. But how do we deal with hallucinations? Yeah.
I mean, this really goes back to who we are as a company. So we look at the evaluation problem in terms of behaviors and trying to understand the expected behaviors for a particular model or particular agent. And at some level, you can imagine, just go very theoretical for a moment, that if you interact with an agent long enough, you will eventually get it to go off course. I think one question is, how long does it take for that to happen? And when it does, how badly does it do it? And so the first thing you really need to do is understand in detail what the sort of variability is with your agent or with your model. How often does it get off course? How quickly does it get off course? And where does it get off course? What are essentially the attack vectors that it's exposed to? Many of those you can fix if you happen to be using Gen AI, you can fix with a prompt. A lot of those you can fix with fine tuning. You can go tune the model you're using to be better in a particular area. Others, you just need to understand when they're happening so you can trap them, whether it's in production or elsewhere, so you can add a little bit of identification for when it's going to happen. Depending on your use case, it might be acceptable that a model eventually doesn't follow a directive that's been given after the 12th, 15th, 20th time a person tries to push it and get it off course. Because you can then layer in that if a person is very belligerent in that manner, that after 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, it's just going to put up the hand and say, stop. I'm not going to have this conversation any longer. And those things you can do very methodically in a system. So we think of it as first starting with the metrics. You need to take a metric-oriented approach to the building. And the metrics start with identifying the behaviors, identifying the evaluation that you want to use for those behaviors. What are the measures you're going to use? Some of which, as many as you can actually, should be deterministic. So when you can describe a check deterministically, that's always the best. In other cases, you can use other models to red team or attack. And then we have a whole mechanism around drivers that allow you to push models in a very intentional manner. So you can build that map, if you will, of where the model has issues. So it's not a perfect answer. I don't think there's an answer of I'll wave the magic wand and all hallucination or confabulation, whatever you want to call it, goes away. I actually think that it's a necessary part of models. They need to come up with different ideas and come back with inventions, but you can architect your system in such a way that it significantly reduces those problems. It's one of the reasons that RAG has been so popular, right? RAG allows you to embed facts into a vector database. You can then retrieve, you can then generate the answer to the customer and then compare back. Did my answer to the customer include the facts that I provided? If not, don't provide that to the customer. Try again. Or more appropriately during build, you can determine how often that occurs. So a lot of this has to do with taking a step back and thinking methodically during the build stage, not treating it as a testing activity. A lot of the old testing world would have built software and maybe I'll get around to testing it. Maybe I'll just let it go out there and do its thing and I'll see where it falls down. That is not the right way to approach Gen AI, agents, agentics, etc. You need to start at the beginning. Question?
Matt.
Yeah.
Will we figure this out at some point? Do you think that we're going to be constantly needing to test and eval the models, or do you think we'll eventually figure it out?
I think that,
or will it be baked into the system itself and just be dynamic from within the agent itself? What are your thoughts?
Couple thoughts. The first one, if it were to disappear, it's because the whole system became deterministic. So I don't think that it's going to disappear because that's the whole reason these non-deterministic systems are so powerful. Will we eventually have AGI that's self-aware and manages itself? I guess possibly. But until that occurs, every one of these agents is use case specific. If it's a useful agent, everything we've talked about here, every one of these is use case specific. And as long as there is a use case specific task for that agent, there's going to be the possibility that it does not perform the task as expected. So this is going to last for quite a while.
You could imagine, though, with a manager model that's monitoring all of the agents, that the manager, if the latency were low enough or if the use case was appropriate, the manager could check every answer before it goes out. Or basically, if you have a multi-step workflow, that you kind of architect the system out to have pretty good confidence that every small step is done correctly. And then the manager checks in between the handoffs between the different agents to make sure that it's not one agent isn't kicking bad data or bad information to the next one, right?
I agree that that's possible. But I think we should also, I ran an innovation team. I think we should defend creativity here for a sec. So I think the manager could do that.
Yes, right.
But if you want to stretch it that far, couldn't it be the case that you need these agents to try some things that may or may not work so that possibly the agent similarly could go, oh, I think an agent just innovated. Like maybe we didn't used to say that on a sales call, but we should say it like, you know what I'm saying?
So the question is, how much leeway does the manager have to say this is just garbage going to the next agent versus that's a creative solution, I'm going to let it pass through, right? So that is the acuity of the manager model, right? Yeah.
To that thing, and you are the person who kind of manages the agent performance. Yes. Like how much error is acceptable? Okay, how much is tolerable, and how much? Because, for example, you said you've saved on hiring an onboarding person. Yeah. If you were to hire an onboarding person, you're not going to hire somebody with 20 years of experience, probably a junior person. They make a lot of mistakes. Yes. There are a lot of things they don't know. They have learned. How do you compare that? Like, what is the expectation from agents? And why do we have this obsession that agents have to be 100% perfect when humans are, even the person with 20 years of experience is never perfect? And to that point, we had a fascinating conversation, like a lot of, what is creativity? Like we hallucinate. Like, why do we hate hallucination so much? Isn't that literally source of creativity? How do we benchmark?
This is absolutely, you're absolutely right. So we're shifting from a paradigm where software was deterministic and programmed and the human solved exactly what the system was supposed to do. And then they wrote code to make sure the system did that every single time, to a paradigm in which these are brains. These are not programmed software systems, right? And they get to think through the things. So the answer to your question is it depends. And so we work with Okareo. We have their scorecards. We run our agents through their scoring mechanisms. And then we always ask ourselves, are these scores acceptable? And then the more interesting thing is what is underneath these scores. So, Matt, Boris, and I just had a call last week where we went through the Okareo scorecard and we were like, well, it failed on this answer, but it seems okay. And it was like, how do we tune, right? What's a failure or what's an acceptable answer? And then they pointed out yeah, but the way that you defined it, it actually technically failed, right? And I'm like, yes, but to me as a human, it seems okay. So there's always this back and forth in the eval, and then making sure that you're allowing for that creativity of when a human looks at it, the answer is perfectly reasonable, but in the strict confines of how the eval was written, it failed. So how do we shift our expectations of this technology? And I think that's what every company and every organization and every leader is going to have to just find our way through, right?
I also think that we're going to see new sort of structural divisions where we may have combined things before, we might now be willing to separate them and others combine. So in this particular case, I think it's not only legitimate, but ideal to have a more creative, we'll call it, business-oriented agent making pan-agent decisions about what good and bad looks like, taking in data that's not specific to one agent's behavior. But when you drop down to a single agent, you're going to look for particular behaviors that it should have, and it shouldn't deviate too grossly from that. And you want the pan-agent to then identify when there's combinations that should be called out or problematic. And I think we're going to start to see these different types of, so in our case, evaluations are more structural as opposed to the management bit, which might be intentionally more creative and taking in a different set of data. It's literally looking across many to figure it out.
Yeah. So we're trying to tune the manager agent, just so you know, to company culture. So it's not just going to be one manager, one size fits all. It's going to be basically attuned to your specific company culture. And I can show you later on a demo that we did around IDEO corporate values versus Amazon corporate values and how the manager evaluates the performance of the agents against those two different rubrics. And that manager is going to need to understand what are the values, what is acceptable performance, what is an acceptable answer, what is acceptable accuracy, not just for every function, but for our company culture, right? Because some companies are like, it's okay to fail. And some companies are like, if you fail, you're fired. So it also depends on the company culture. And that needs to be brought into account.
Maybe we do need general managers for the time being then.
that maybe, right? Because that's going to be important. All right, Scott.
I got a question over here.
Oh, yeah.
I had one question on the economics of the multi-agent systems.
Mm-hmm.
So you do save 2 employees out of 7, but then you're also investing in the technology, token in, token out, and you pay this LLMs to basically the underlying technology. So it's not really you are saving 2 employees, but probably 1 employee out of 7, because you're also investing in this technology. At the same time, on the monitoring and evaluation of this technology. So just wanted to understand the economics of these multi-agent systems. How do you see that evolving if you have a swarm of agents just talking to each other, and then the underlying technology? Do we have what's the timeline where it's the economics work out for this?
So the economics work out. It's less than 1 FTE.
There's no way we're spending $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 on a single agent, or even 2. Even probably including my own time, if I went and made it myself, on an annual basis, it's $2,000, $3,000. This is not,
Yeah,
you'd have to have an extremely high volume agent to get to tens of thousands of dollars.
And the other thing is with
the extreme.
So
go ahead.
let me say one more thing. So you also have to architect the system intelligently. So, 4.0 Mini can do a lot of basic things, right? And that's like super cheap. Higher order reasoning, you want to use the top level. So you need to make sure that you're choosing the right model for the right task and for the right agent. And a lot of them are going to be on Mini, And so that's the other piece. Like, it's not as expensive. Like, you're not using O1 for like every single agent, right? Like, that would be super expensive. But again, when you have a system where you're having a platform that can help you architect this network of agents intelligently, right? And where you can pick from among different models and different platforms, that's when you can really save a lot of money, right? So, and have the performance that you need, right?
I would add that the pace that you gain and the opportunity for people to look across multiple functions and start to think about those functions in a combined manner without having them become isolated into individuals that are running off and have their own sort of reasons for being and going off into the world. The efficiency that you gain is equally important. And in fact, given the kind of efficiency multipliers we're seeing, maybe even more important than purely the number of employees that you might or may not have hired in that moment. I agree, though, cost-wise, it's definitely fractional. But even taken to the extreme, there's still a massive benefit in terms of efficiency and pace that you're seeing, and being able to have these autonomous functions just represent you and represent the company in the world, and constantly be moving and not get angry, not get unhappy. They just report back and keep moving whenever. In our case, we have developers. Developers might want to log in at 11 o'clock at night and have a working session. And they might want to have a conversation at 11 o'clock at night about how to solve a particular eval problem that they're running into. It'd be very hard for me to go build around the clock, help in that manner. So
I wanted to, can I just ask Scott, and then we'll get to the other question. So Scott, like, one of the things I want to make sure that we address is the question about enterprises, right? So as someone who ran huge kind of innovation projects and software transformation projects for global companies, how are you thinking, like, what's the first step for large enterprises, right? Like, who maybe aren't thinking about not hiring a person, right? But actually starting to transform their current business processes. Where should enterprises start, right? And how do you design out that process or that system? Like those steps?
Yeah, I can share a tiny bit of context that might be helpful. So in about 2009, and I worked at Salesforce for 18 years, I'm running this thing called the CIO Advisory Board. It's like a very fancy meeting. You get all the top CIO customers in the room. You got Parker Harris, you got Mark Benioff. They're going, okay, CIOs, like, what should Salesforce do, right? And something very unusual happened in this particular meeting in 2009. We've been running it for like years. The CIOs suddenly started sounding like CEOs. And of course, we're very curious people. We were like chatting with Mark afterwards. It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe the CIO is the CEO of the future. And he actually put something out in the press to sort of test that. Like, I don't know. Like, what do people think? It was like, no. It's like, okay, that's not it. But what was going on? We all now call this digital transformation. That's what happened. At the time, we used no such terms. When people came up with that term, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? What's transformation? Big change. Very expensive, complicated, hard to do. That's definitely not what people want. Digital. Yeah, sure, means to an end. What we were talking about was the CIOs were saying, I can create an entirely new way of operating that is newly valuable for both my customer and our business, and we are more profitable and growing as a result. That's what they were saying. We're like, pretty surprising that CRM ended up in the middle of that. We got to go figure out how to harness that opportunity, and like off we ran. The big lesson of my team, we did this for like a decade, was we would engage CEOs for the first time, software companies talking to CEOs, right? And they would ask us over and over and over again, well, you people are super innovative. What's your culture like? We're like, aren't we going to talk about like CRM and like marketing and putting a bunch of data in some system? No. Because we have to go change our company. So in the first couple, I don't know, it was like a year or so, we're like, okay, we're going to show up and we're going to say, well, you tell us how your culture is doing, because we have learned a few things, not so much from ourselves, but from all these other companies what the heck are they doing? How are they going digital? How are they transforming? What do they value completely differently? And so I think that dynamic will be incredibly similar.
Yeah.
Incredibly similar. Because you had to throw a whole bunch of assumptions out the window. You had to make it completely okay to experiment. Right? We started talking about citizen developers and all this, right? All this stuff was going on, right? I think the same thing is true. And it's very much, you heard this conversation, robots just entered the building. They're doing jobs. We're probably going to manage them not that differently than we manage people. If you've got a manager agent, it's going to explain performance in the same kinds of terms you talk about human performance. So as a leadership team, you have to think about in 10 years, especially our point of view, B2B, I will still have people buying from people. What is the incredibly valuable thing that my customers would hire my employees to do? And where would they love to have all the robots helping us out? Mm-hmm. Therefore, how should I unleash that change at my company? What is that story? What's the narrative that my culture in this moment would go, that's a very exciting future. I'm going to go help create that at my company instead of when does my job disappear? Because most of the jobs are going to disappear. They're going to get reinvented. It's going to happen. But you have to get everybody excited about we're going to reinvent it together, because honestly, if you're not, you're just going to get laid off. I mean, the tech industry suddenly figured out layoffs are the cool thing to do. So, it's probably infectious in a very bad way, I'm guessing. But as a leadership team, we saw you can get way ahead of this by starting with yourselves first leadership team, the culture, unleashing experimentation. And I think being really wise about where you try to find those quick wins. And I think Matt was trying to emphasize it. Go astoundingly fast. This is going way, way, way faster than mobile, social, cloud, big data, you name it. AI is going 10 times faster.
Yeah. I think we had some questions over here that I wanted to take too.
I was actually wondering, do you define an agent as purely LLM based, or can you also build an agent based on other machine learning models?
So I'm going to tell you my definition, and then we have Alejandra, and she can tell me, she can chime in as well. So my definition of agents is that they have 3 characteristics. The first one is that they have smart conversations. Okay, so they can actually converse or take orders or collaborate with a human being. Okay, because the humans are still the principals. These are the agents, right, of the principals. Anybody studied economics. So they need to have smart conversations. They need to hold the memory of those conversations. Memory is the enabler, right? People usually say memory, tools, and then LLMs. But let me just kind of break down what that means. So the first one is smart conversations. The second one is they can take actions in other systems, right? So they have access to tools. They can actually perform actions in other systems. And then the third one is that they do that with a lot of freedom. They have the ability to reason through multiple steps on their own. They have freedom to think. They are not agents unless they have agency. The technology that enables that right now is LLMs. So in my definition, yes, they are always LLM based because they have to have the freedom to think. And they need to be able to reason through multiple steps without someone having programmed, right, what those steps will be. Yes. So my definition, yes.
So in the case you would employ a machine learning model for something that would actually be one of the tools, maybe.
Probably.
Exactly. So yes, a more deterministic tool would be part of that tool set. Yeah.
So I guess as the business environment changes, requirement changes, and then I guess the agents must learn and evolve, right?
Yes.
Just want to hear your experience.
Right.
I mean, if you, let's say, operate for a period of time, 3 months, 6 months down, and was it able to take input, like from the outcome and say, oh, I should answer it this way for this kind of customer, for example, or if this kind of person coming or onboarding, right, I should do something differently, right? So I want to understand a little bit about the evolving, right? How does it evolve? Either through improve itself, right? Either by looking at data of the outcome, or having maybe a checker or a manager saying that, oh, next time if you see a customer like this, remember to say this. Yeah. And then I guess the memory is doing some part of that. I just want to understand about the...
I can share a bit of an example, then you probably want to unpack it.
Yeah.
So we're the youngest company up here. And so while we do have a very simple website and we think it's super effective, we have some customers going, we have not yet published our customer case studies. So our agent on the website doesn't know any customer case studies. So when we take a look at our manager's view in Wayfound of our agent on the website, it is consistently saying, so your sales agent is having an excellent conversation, and if you just gave it some case studies, it would be doing way better. So you should be publishing some case studies here. Like, we know. I mean, not that it's genius, right? I mean, obviously publish the case studies, right? But just as an example, that when the manager is functioning, it's evaluating it the way we described what the job looked like. We said, this is a genius, highly consultative salesperson. It should be astoundingly, it should. So of course it would give a concrete example. It should probably break it down. It should do all kinds of things in those case studies, right? And so we know as soon as we have them available, we will publish it. And there's a way in the manager for us to let it know. By the way, we have taken that suggestion, but go ahead and break down the rest of,
So there are many different ways to do this. Okay, so you can have agents self-improve. You can do that, and they can self-improve automatically, right? Based on things that they learn. You can give them access to the internet. They can, find new things that they think they should do and self-improve themselves. We instead chose to do two things. One, we have a manager agent that is assessing the performance of all of the agents that it is managing. And it says this agent was not able to meet the requests of users. It would be better if it were improved through these directives. I suggest that you add these directives. I suggest that you add this information to help the agent improve. We could have the manager do that, especially the suggested directives on its own. We choose to have always human in the loop, okay? Because it gets pretty freaky, right? If the agents are just self-improving themselves and you have no idea what your customer conversations are going to be.
Did you try?
Humans, huh?
Did you try that?
Oh, yes. So we yes. I mean, it could potentially get very freaky, right? Because humans have given something directed. So it's like having an employee, like you just hired an intern. And that intern, you've just told that intern, hey, you can do whatever you need to improve your performance. What is that intern going to do if you don't have any idea, right? Like, no, you want to have a situation where the intern comes to you and says, hey, I think I can do my job better if I did these things. Is that okay, boss?
Right.
That's the kind of thing that we think is better. But yes, you could make them just do it automatically. We don't think that's a very good idea.
Maybe to that exact point, it's not a very good idea. So I had a model that I was using for inbound contacts. And it was just a very basic one that was looking at the message and deciding what the intent was. It wasn't quite a classifier, it was close. And then sending it on. And it was working okay. And I decided that I would provide it back because I was using Okareo data points of past conversations and use that as part of its sort of context so we can make better choices because we were getting a lot of different types of inbounds. It seemed logical, seemed like a good thing to do. And then suddenly it started to fall apart. We had a ramp of people communicating to us in other languages. And we're not doing business in Korea and Japan and Russia and other places. And we were getting all these inbounds. And some of them were actually product questions. It was all spam at the end of the day. But they were asking perfectly logical questions in some other language. And this model started to go really, really poorly because it started to it didn't know the difference between English and something else. Right. And we had nightly, because we're about evaluation and we had it in CI, I had behaviors and evaluation nightly, saw the changes start to happen. And for us, the solution was to go back to that set of scenarios, the behaviors we expected. And I went and added a whole series of additional scenarios around multiple languages, put those in, marked them all as irrelevant, said, nope, none of these should work, made a small tweak. I had to go through a couple of times on the prompt to get that right and put it back out. But in that case, it's a small case. It's a simple case. But it's a case where by closing the feedback loop on that model actually made it worse. And it was only by having the monitoring in place and seeing why, and then expanding the behavioral parameters of what was possible and what those possibilities meant. That was the only way I could fix it and come back on the other side.
I think it just taxes your delegation skills. I mean, in this room, can you raise your hand and go, I'm the best delegator of any person I've ever met. I mean, it's one of the toughest skills, right? I mean, how many management classes do you get? Oh, I'm still working on my delegation skills. Right. And so what you give these agents agency, if you said, take my initial instructions and run with it, you're just betting I'm the best delegator you've ever seen. And like, that's a bad bet right now.
But you also don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
You just don't want to.
It also forces you to really think through what it is you want them to do.
Right.
So I think people can be a little lax in terms of delegations. Like, it's not just I'm delegating, it's I should be articulating what I expect you to do. If you don't do that effectively, it really jumps out with the agents.
Right.
If you don't tell the agent what his boundaries are.
Yeah. Travis?
So you said in order to be an agent, it needs to be able to interact in other systems and do things. Back at the beginning of the conversation, you were describing how you're using it to do your workflows. Are you home building all of that ability of this agent, like the PM agent, presumably interacts with Jira and like all the tools that might be in the PM tech stack? Are you finding agents that already have those integrations, or you're home growing all of them?
We have
a mix, right?
Yeah, it's a mix.
HubSpot. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have, so HubSpot has some agents that they've published. So we use those and we bring them in. Gitbook has an agent. We bring that into our platform. And then the connection between the agents, we just make the connections on our platform. And we can literally just very simply kind of hook them together so that they can send messages to each other. And then we capture the full transcripts.
Yeah.
And the full transcripts includes the cool tool calls, as well as the prompts that one agent sends to another one and what it returns, not just what it outputs to the end user. So then you get the full debug. Basically, you have a full debug transcript that you can use.
As a related example, so with my squad of 5 folks at our company, they all think ChatGPT is great. So we've got a ChatGPT instance. For the most important agents on Wayfound, I simply connect a GPT to the most appropriate Wayfound agent and then give it a name. So our consultant agent, we call it Agent Delta, like the agent of change, right? Yeah. So you just hop in ChatGPT where all the users are like, it's multimodal. They know everything they're doing. They're like, cracking all this stuff. And they're using the Wayfound agents. They're using some GPT thing. They grab it off the GPT store. Like, the users are good to go. So we both mix and match that way, as well as pull in some other company's bespoke agent that fits well with our team of agents. The manager agent being the thing that makes us feel okay about doing that.
So I'm taking a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
Not all that different, but slightly different. So I'm also using Wayfound for a set of use cases. But the hub that I was talking about earlier, I mean, these days, code generation is so powerful and so capable, and everyone's APIs are so well articulated that it literally took minutes to go grab any given service that I want to use. It just takes a few moments to go add it into the hub. And then I define the function call around it. And now my agent has access to a whole new system, and the scheme is right there already. So it's like when I added Airtable, for example, it took maybe, actually not kidding here, maybe 10 or 15 minutes just to get that sort of set up. And then I made a whole bunch of agents. And it turns out Airtable also has an AI thing, so you can actually build all your tables via their description.
I'm using Notion for this, but I can. All right, keep going.
So the hub, I've been able to add
a lot of us to Airtable today.
but in the hub, I'm able to add integrations to that hub or add new mechanisms to the hub, and then define them as function calls, and then get access to them via agents and the other mechanisms very quickly, all with very, very little lift. And so I think there's a bar that's lowered on BizOps specifically. I think a big part of what we're talking about here is we've all been in the big enterprise organizations where BizOps is a big problem, and it's hard to get all the data flowing to the right places and to the right people at the right time. And suddenly that looks like a much more manageable, we'll call it problem. I won't call it solved, but much more manageable, especially if you rethink it. And I would even argue that product management, the way you're describing, is somewhat of a BizOps problem.
Yeah, of course.
Connecting all these different systems, getting the analytics, understanding how it works.
Right. So the one thing I also just want to stress before we go is that all of these things that you've heard are like measurable ROI for the bottom line. But none of this would be possible if we weren't actually driving our top line with AI agents, right? So like it's what I tell a lot of people is if you're just working on improving efficiency with AI agents, you're still going to be dead 5 years from now, right? Unless you take the next step and actually figure out how to make AI and generative AI part of your core value proposition, because all of the companies that are both have that combination, like the killer combination is top line and efficiency to drive, real, kind of business improvement, right? And overall, businesses will just be better with generative AI when you're both doing customer facing product experiences as well as internal. So don't stop at the internal use cases for ROI, right? Keep going and start putting it in front of your customers too. So, yes, yeah.
Quick comment questions. Like when you were talking about how to allocate tasks and like cheaper, more expensive, like the way I see it, I wonder what you think, is we literally are building, again, the structure of an enterprise. You have executive, very expensive, middle management who has to delegate and, be the middle management, and then, junior employees. So we're going to have the cost structure the same.
Not the cost structure, but we will have a similar management structure potentially. So, the current corporation and the way that we organize our company, that's what you're saying, right? We're going to basically be recreating.
Cheaper, less experience, cheaper, agents. A lot of things.
Yeah.
And then, a little bit more expensive and more capable, middle management. And then we have a few executive, super expensive models that, cost, by that.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you agree that it's literally at the end of the day, translating that into what does it make sense that the cheaper model, what type of task they have to do, what type of tasks we expect from middle management to do, their middle level model, and the most efficient, expensive models are the top of the funnel that they allocate and decide and manage.
Maybe. So suppose on the front line, when the customer arrives, you got millions of customers, the thing the customer wants you to do requires the most expensive model. You're going to give the most expensive model to that person because the customer's willing and able and values paying for it. So I think the org chart will look so similar, but you're going to choose. I know.
I'm going to jump in and say, I think it will not work that way because it's all going to be based on the use case, which I think what you're also saying.
Yeah.
Like that you need to find the model that works best for that use case.
Inner working of the models, not individual interactions.
Right now, we're talking about this at a particular moment in time when these models are just first getting built. And so I actually think that LLM model building is kind of like electricity. Like it costs a lot of money and a lot of capital. It's very capital expensive to build, the infrastructure, right? To build one power plant. But once you've got it built, every additional unit of electricity or kilowatt is, very, very cheap, right? The marginal cost is very cheap once it's built. So once you pay down that initial, capital requirement, capital expense, you can basically drop the price. So we're in a moment in time where we have better and better power plants being built. At some point, we're going to get to a level where I think almost all of this is going to be too cheap to meter, as Sam Altman says. I think that is where we're going. I think it's like electricity, only going to be far less resource intensive. In the end of the electricity, the power thing is still going to be a problem, but that doesn't go away.
Yeah,
but the model itself, right, is going to be fairly inexpensive as we get to maturity in the model.
A quick comment / question on the ROI that you're discussing. I think another quick conversation visit is valid here is you're very, to my understanding, early stage, and if you have replaced 2 people out of 5. Whatever, it doesn't show because in order to build a company, you need a basic thing. The question is when you're scaling, where a 10 million revenue, 20 million revenue company, how many employees have? Do you have any thoughts of your prediction? You're not there yet, but have you ever thought of how much more efficient are you going to be at that scale?
Again, I believe we'll be far more efficient because the normal org chart is highly pyramidal. It would be much more narrow with a whole lot of agents at the bottom, right? It's going to be more T-shaped, upside down T-shaped.
I think true ROI will show in its that scale rather than the.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I mentioned this before. It's changing how we're thinking, how Boris and I are thinking about the company we're building. and how we're going to scale the company, because we can afford through agents to have a higher touch per customer than we would if we didn't have the agents in place. And that changes everything about the business model. So instead of 5 years of trying to perfect a no-touch onboarding path that figures out every possible way in which a person might want to experience our product, instead, yes, of course, we want to get to that perfect world, but we can have these agents helping people along and helping them learn, helping solve specific use cases, and actually building a relationship. And then, of course, we can be brought in at the right time when we can actually provide that extra moment that pushes them over the edge. I think that changes the entire model of how we go to market. So in terms of scale, I don't see how it'll be possible without it. And it means larger contracts, means we can take on larger customers earlier, means we can take on more complex use cases earlier. We don't have to hyper simplify the product. Yeah. We can actually have a product that has a few more edges to it, and still be efficient and reasonable.
Awesome. Okay, maybe one more question, and then Matt and I are going to do some demos in the back room there. Yes.
Yeah. So my question, I've got two questions actually. So the first question is, what percentage of AI B2B SaaS companies in SF are using AI SDRs? And is it enough for you to advise aspiring human SDRs to not go that route? Number two, do you find that your existing customers, some of them that you deem product market fit, are overestimating your AI SDR's capabilities? And how is your AI customer success dealing with that feedback?
Do you have some information on that? Would you like to share? Seems like you're very informed on this topic. So what did you say?
There's a company called 11X in London. I flew in from London 2 days ago. That's where I'm from. And they mentioned that a lot of their legacy customers are overestimating the capabilities of their product. Called Jordan, who's from Wall Street. He's a 24/7 inbound outbound sales agent. And I guess that's due to a lack of education of the product. That's their own issue. But
so if I could jump in, I think it's actually a lot like the case you just made about the product manager. Mm-hmm. Certainly my mental model is not that it drops to zero, but rather there's a lot of legwork that has to be done that can just be managed and then can be performed more autonomously. And that means you talk about founder selling and founder-led sales, and we talk about the team getting out into the world. It enables us to do that efficiently. So it's not so much that the entire role is replaced, but rather that a lot of that just mechanical work that's necessary before you add that creativity that sits on top of it, a lot of that work can be pulled out of the system. And then folks like us can go through and add that extra bit. Right. And at this stage, especially for us, we actually need to be involved in that stage anyway. And I think BDR and SDR are actually different cases, and I would treat each one a little differently. But the big piece is you hire people because there's a lot of work to be done. And it's a fraction of that work that actually requires the strategic thinking and the creativity and whatnot. And the rest of it, honestly, ends up being somewhat mechanical when that, not that we're writing PRDs, but if the PRD need to be written, it's going to take a lot of time for a human to sit there and type the whole thing up. But an LLM, here you go. Here's your source data. Here's your PRD. It's been written. Oh, no, by the way, here's a list of tickets I think you probably should build. All right. So that's the mechanical work. Knowing whether that's the right thing to build at the right time, that takes an additional person to look at and say, yeah, that's prioritized correctly. Yeah. So I think the same comment with the SDR, BDR split. I don't expect that there is zero. I expect that we are picking up, I'm pointing to my co-founder over here, we're picking up a fraction of additional work, or someone who's in the company picks up a fraction, but the large mechanical bits are covered.
Yeah. On the last thing, if you think you want to be an SDR, probably don't use that terminology, but say you know how to manage SDR agents in order to complete the tasks and the goals and the outcomes that you want your whole SDR team to complete, right? You are the strategic person who's going to be managing the SDRs.
An interview question we're trying out on our team is, so suppose we hire you to join our company, tell us about the team of agents that you would like to have working for you. Mm-hmm. And if you have a demo to show us, we'd be happy to have you present that to us in your final interview and we can talk about it. That's literally what we ask people. So, yeah.
We do have to wrap it up. Matt and I will be going into that room if you want to just see a quick demos of Wayfound and Okareo and some of the things we talked about. if you want help, obviously, Scott is here to answer your questions. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate your time. And Michael?
Yes. And so let's round of applause for our guests here. Thank you guys so much. I don't know okay, I'm biased. We are personal investors in Okareo and Wayfound, and I am so fired up about the future. I just can't even contain myself. I know we have a lot of work to do and the like, but I'm really excited about it. So you guys are going to go do some demos. We're going to do it in the conference room right there. You're welcome to stick around. You can bring your chair there, go get a drink, come back. There might be beer in the fridge, so if you want a beer, help yourself. And then for those who don't, you can stick around and hang out as well, and happy to talk to anybody as you guys head out. So again, thank you guys so much for SF Tech Week. Let's go. And one more shameless plug. Where's Ale?
Right there.
Right there.
Okay, so Ale, raise your hand. Okay, Alejandra, she is the person to go to talk about our AI strategy here at B Partners. She knows more about this than pretty much everybody except the founders in the room. So maybe. So please go talk to Ale if you have a company that you're working on or an idea or a project. She's your point person. Okay.
And thank you for letting us use the space.
All right. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
You want me in the middle or do you want?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You're so sorry. That's fine.
We're all good.